Hey guys, you've probably catched this by now, but in a developer update from past week, RIOT announced the retirement of the Twisted Treeline. Of course, since all content on this channel revolves around this map, I can't say I'm all too pleased about it. Regardless, I would be lying if I'd say that I didn't see this coming, especially after the recent success of Teamfight Tactics. I hope this video can help the developers at RIOT Games to rethink their decision, but I also hope to set something straight, for the story you might know is far from the truth. The article, from which you will find a link in the description, discusses the state and future plans for the different game modes in League of Legends, such as Nexus Blitz, ARAM and All Random Earth. The section about the Twisted Treeline states some interesting findings and then some promises about rewards and whatnot. The former contains the following. Since we've been focusing on modes like ARAM a bit more, we've seen a few people ask, what about Twisted Treeline? One of League's original alternative game modes, Twisted Treeline has been a place for League players to get the MOBA experience of Summoner's Rift on a different map with a different meta. However, Treeline has always suffered from low queue sizes, even in times where we added new items, map specific champion balance and even the Twisted Treeline redesign way back in 2012. At present, it falls short of even the numbers we saw at the end of Nexus Blitz's second run. This small population leads to long queue times, poor matchmaking and ultimately an unsatisfying PvP experience for many of the players who do queue up for the Treeline. Outside of the player population, Twisted Treeline's art, map design and even game pacing don't meet today's current quality bar and player needs. We debated on whether ARAM-esque level of support will bring it up to standard, but the lack of growth from the previous efforts we mentioned led us to the conclusion that it just wouldn't be enough to make the Treeline a healthy long-term game mode. So at the end of this season, we will be retiring Twisted Treeline. Like Dominion before it, we're sad to see a long-time part of the game disappear, but we feel this is the best decision for League as it lets us keep our focus on larger game modes. The core message here is that, due to low interest of the overall player base, there is simply not enough to work for and with, and that the removal of the map is merely a logical step to take. And although the Treeline community is indeed very small, the limited interest is not a consequence of poor game design, but rather of plain and sole neglection. 6 months back, a user named TwillieTheFirst listed all the meaningful changes which were made to the Treeline over the patches from before. The conclusion was that the large patch for Twisted Treeline was on June 10th, 2015, now more than 4 years ago. He then puts this into perspective by saying that at that time, Echo had just been released a patch prior to that, and since then, 20 new champions have been released. In the same amount of time, not a single impactful Twisted Treeline update was released. Now, it's of course also possible to turn the whole thing around. Instead of saying that the small player base is a result of the lack of balance changes, it could also be that the lack of balance changes comes from lack of interest. Luckily, Meddler assures us that the former is clearly the case. He says that the only reason that the map hasn't been removed yet is that the player base is just a little too big still. All they have to do is cause the game mode to degrade a little further until the player base declines to the likes of Dominion. And as you can see, they've managed to do this by not doing anything at all. This stands in great contrast with the developer post, where it is stated that they feel sad to see a long-time part of the game disappear, because they clearly don't. However, the lack of interest for the Twisted Treeline isn't solely the consequence of a lack of balance changes. The exclusion of Twisted Treeline to obtain mastery tokens and complete quests from the event passes haven't helped either. The effect that this can have on player interest was demonstrated during the second run of Nexus Blitz, where after the missions ended, most of the players left the mode altogether. Overall, the article tries to make it seem like the dev team did their very best to keep the Treeline alive, when clearly the opposite comprises the truth. This is quite an interesting observation, as the goal of these developer posts is to improve transparency and show why they are doing, and in this case, not doing certain things. I'm usually not the one to be pointing fingers, but in order to have a civilized discussion on the subject matter, I think we should all first be on the same page. You've neglected the map for over 4 years and that's the reason why it's dead. Just own it. Now, I don't want to spend the entire video complaining. I get that you don't want to invest time and resources into a game mode from which you expect no results. Instead, allow me to show you some things you might have forgotten or missed in your consideration. Because even though you might not expect it, you're throwing away a very potent feature of the game. And to do that, I first like to take you back to this 2010 article by designers Richard Yu and David Dunn titled Twisted Treeline: Iterative Level Design in a Competitive Online Game. The article states that the map that was to complement Summoner's Rift at the time should provide new fun competitive options for players by providing an alternative to the core experience. The map was to host teams of 3 players instead of 5, so smaller groups of friends too could have a full team clash without random people interfering. Additionally, the games were to be shorter than those on Summoner's Rift, aiming at 15 to 20 minutes instead of the, at that time, 35 to 45 minute average. Also important was that the players should be encouraged to wander off their lanes faster and engage earlier in ambushing and teamfighting. Funny thing is that even though this article was written on the design of the first Treeline map, all these aspirations are met on the one we currently have. Now let's look at one of the more recent projects of the developer's team, Nexus Blitz. There are many obvious similarities between this mode and 3 vs 3. There is a lot of early action, games don't tend to take long and players are encouraged to move around a lot, even during the laning phase. However, we all know that although successful in these goals, after players got their rewards, they simply stopped playing. The reason why I think Nexus Blitz didn't turn out to be a success is because there was no competitiveness, no core strategy to develop, and no team comp to increase the rates of success. It's those things that makes players want to improve and try again. In a mode that lacks these elements, every other game will feel exactly the same as the one before. In my opinion, it would be a waste to throw away years of development when what you are trying to create with Nexus Blitz is right there in front of you. If starting anew is what it takes, so be it. But this is simply a concept that you shouldn't lose. The tree line really fills a gap. I know it's hard to see that now, but just allow yourself to think about it for a second. Each month, I get thousands of views on my Season 9 guide, and a recent tournament attracted over 1.8 thousand live viewers. All this only shows is that even in its current state, there is a desire that moves players towards it. And have you noticed how the Treeline community, however small it may be, has its own websites, discords, info pages and events? Not to forget that there are countless posts about what's wrong with the game and how you could fix it. It's all there. Even after 4 years of neglect, players feel that what the Treeline offers outweighs what it lacks, and are still looking for ways to reach out and make it work. On behalf of the entire community and those that could have been part of it, I therefore ask you, please retract your decision and make the Treeline to what it was meant to be. You are retiring so much more than what meets the eye.